Matcha became extremely popular around the world in the past few years. It's labeled as a superfood, which is a common marketing buzzword that refers to any foodstuff that isn't an artificial combination of corn syrup and hydrogenated oil. You see it everywhere as chocolate, ice cream, frappé, you name it. It's hard to believe that matcha was once a luxury product reserved only for Buddhist monks, the samurais, and the upper class. In fact, matcha had at some point a profound influence in the politics and the arts in pre-modern Japan. So how did matcha achieve this status? Let's go back to the time when it all started. Matcha was introduced by Buddhist monks to Japan in the 12th century, 300 years after tea itself was brought from China. Later on, Chanoyu or Sadou, literally the way of tea, began to develop as a cultural activity of preparing matcha in Japan. It's more popularly known today as the Japanese tea ceremony. Chanoyu eventually became a hot activity amongst the elite, the samurais, and the merchants. In fact, one of the three unifiers of Japan, Oda Nobunaga, was a tea lover himself. He amassed luxurious tea bowls, teacups, and other tea utensils to display his wealth. As a result, he had access to the merchant class who also happened to be tea fanatics. When he threatened to lay waste on the merchant city of Sakai, one of the wealthiest cities in Japan back then, the merchants and tea masters in the city were able to convince him to be merciful by submitting and giving Nobunaga gifts of famous tea luxuries. Being able to control these tea-loving merchants meant that he had control over large sums of money and weaponry that the warring armies so badly needed. Nobunaga used tea to strengthen his power as a daimyo. Nobunaga's successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, was also a tea lover and a fast learner. He knew the politics behind tea and took it to his hands when Nobunaga was assassinated, ironically after a tea ritual. Hideyoshi took full advantage of Chanoyu. He took control of the merchants. He used tea rooms as meeting places where he discussed classified military tactics with his subjects. He also offered to prepare tea for the emperor. This was not a humble offer at all, considering Hideyoshi's origins as a commoner and the emperor who was believed to be a descendant of a god. He wanted everyone to know that he had the power to oblige even the emperor to drink his tea. Toyotomi Hideyoshi used tea to establish power not only over his subjects but also over the emperor. That said, probably the most influential person in the way of tea was Senno Rikyu. He was the tea master of both Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi. He gave the art its final form, further integrating the philosophy of wabi-sabi. Wabi meaning finding fulfillment in scarcity, and sabi, or finding beauty from the rustic or the faded, has become the principles on which Sadou revolves. Sennorikyu used raku ware for his tea bowls, which look faded and unpolished. Wabi-sabi focuses on imperfectness rather than perfectness. His influence was so profound that most, if not all, schools of Chanoyu in Japan recognize Sennorikyu as their origin. He was named as the tea master of Japan by the emperor himself and was employed by Hideyoshi as one of his closest advisors and used him to communicate classified information, negotiate in delicate concessions, and look after Hideyoshi's castle while he was in campaign. He was able to use Rikyuu like so precisely because he was a tea master and no one would think that he knew anything about war. However, as Rikyuu's prominence grew more respected in the Chanoyu world, the more their relationship fell apart. In the end, for still unknown reasons, Hideyoshi commanded Rikyuu to take his own life. Rikyuu died in 1591 at the age of 69. But his legacy didn't end there. His memory is well alive in the Chanoyu schools you'd see in Japan. Despite its virescent monochromatic appeal, matcha has a colorful history. It has been loved for many centuries, be it to unify Japan or to bring a green contrast on your Instagram page. Matcha itself is the perfect representation of its own history. It's full bodied and slightly bitter. It is precisely this rich and astringent taste that gives matcha its appeal.